Welcome back to the Garden State Outdoorsman podcast presented by Boondocks Hunting. I'm your host, Mike Nitre.
Hi, everyone. Your co-host here, Joe Mallett.
And your co-host, Kirk Rethusen.
Great. And today with us, we have Johnny Floegel. Hopefully I said that right.
Yeah, you got it.
Correct me. So, Johnny, welcome. I'm probably going to be a little bit of a backseat driver on this one because Johnny's main focus is fishing. Kurt's probably going to be the one doing a lot of the questioning and conversation. But why don't we start off with a little introduction about yourself, Johnny? How did you get to know Mike? Tell us a little about your background and take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually knew Mike a little bit in high school. We both grew up in Summit, New Jersey. Remember watching that kid play hockey. And so back in the day, I was fishing a little bit in Jersey. And then I got, we probably get into this in a little bit later, but I got more and more into the sport through college. And then especially after graduating. And then, definitely growing up in Jersey, especially in like suburban area, it's definitely an interesting place to get into the sport. It's a lot more pressured. And it was something that I really had to start venturing out of the state for to really get a sense of what was out there. And then once I sort of developed a skill set and a real passion for it, bringing it back home has been something that's meant a lot to me. And then kind of rediscovering the state from the inside out. Now that I know what to look for, that's been something that I've really been about.
So real quick, what is it like growing up in Summit? I mean, I know what it is, but tell, the rest of our fans and your fans out there and what it's like growing up in this damn town.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. I think one thing about Summit is a lot of times feels like a lot of people are going down a very similar path, and people a lot of times feel like it's like a very much suburb of New York City, a lot of finance families, a lot of money rolling around. And that kind of leads to, there's obviously it's like a safe place to grow up, a lot of good stuff going on, but at the same time, there's a little bit of a lack of diversity in the sense of like interests. And for me, that was always something, I feel like with something like fishing, it's not something that everybody's doing. It's not like we're out in Wyoming, everyone's got a tree stand, everyone's got a river in their backyard. It's something you really got to find within yourself. So I think growing up in Summit, especially as like an outdoorsman, you really got to find your group, and that kind of takes place over time. And not only that, but the actual experiences themselves, they're a little bit more, they're hidden in plain sight, kind of. I grew up fishing the Passaic River about a mile from the high school, even less. And people are driving over that every day to get to the liquor store, to get to football practice, wherever the hell they're going every single day. Not realizing that they're going over big pike, trout, bass, right in their backyard. So I think Summit's an interesting place in the sense that you really gotta look hard for these opportunities, but at the same time, they're there. And it is eye-opening once you start to have these conversations. Like I saw that you had this podcast, reached out to you briefly. It's cool to see that there are more people in the town who are involved with these activities than you might think just from, having gone to school and growing up there and not really expecting that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, the little spot you're talking about where the Passaic and, you got the bridge and everything. What was your first fish pulling out of there? And, tell, a little bit more about the experience, because I fish there. I hate fishing there because there's so many people going there. There's always somebody driving over, and the water is just disgusting.
Yeah. So I've had a lot of crazy experiences at the Passaic because I started getting into fishing a little bit before I had a license. And I grew up right by the high school, so I was about biking distance from the Passaic, and that was really the only water that I could bike to. And I went there a lot and never really did well. Like you said, the water's gross. It's so pressured. But if you hit it at certain times, it can be really amazing. And the first trip I ever took there that was really good, I was talking to my buddy, Eric, kid, he's bass fishing Jersey. He does Uncle Larry Outdoors with me. And we were just talking about baits, and we went down there and he gave me a couple spinners, and we went on opening day, got there at 8. And that spot, not to burn anything, but it's the Passaic, so it's whatever. The little waterfall spot where Summit kind of meets Chatham. There's like that, you know what I'm talking about. We were just throwing right into the edge of that rip, and there's like a little eddy right off that waterfall, and there's like 80 guys lined up along that bank. And we must have pulled out like 40 or 50 stockies that day. and everyone else is catching like one or two on peewees or whatever they're throwing. And we were just having the time of our lives. We went back, and that whole week, it was just every single cast. And I was like, wow, this is pretty incredible that there's this kind of fishing opportunity within a couple minutes of my house. It might not last all year. It might not even last all week, but it made me really open my eyes. It's like, okay, I got to do some more exploring and seeing what else there is to offer. So we kept going back to the Passaic. We made sure we hit that spot hard. And if you really look hard enough, man, there was one year we were catching a ton of big largemouth under some of the brush there. There's smallies in there. There's big pike that come up to eat those stock trout. So if you really look hard enough, you can find some incredible opportunity there. And that was just a place where I grew up really exploring. Really taught me how to look in my own backyard before I had the opportunity to start driving to places that were a lot better. So I'm definitely appreciative that I had the Passaic and that I started in a place that wasn't that good, because it really taught me how to fish pressured water before I moved into places that were more untouched.
Yeah, no, great point. And one, we're gonna have to we'll team up one day and we'll go fish that little home field advantage spot. And two, I've never actually, I've fished there not many times, but I've never pulled anything out of there.
Oh, really? Okay.
I've heard that people have said there's stuff there, but every time I go, it's nothing. It's not one of my main spots. So like on opening day, I don't go there.
No. And to be honest with you, I haven't been back. It's been years. It's been years since I've gone back. Once you start seeing what else there is out there, there's almost no real reason to go back. But one thing I've always said about Jersey, we used to always complain when we were in high school about, and like early college, about living in Summit and like, wow, there's not that good fishing around here. But then it's almost like, well, if you grow up in northern Maine or Canada and you have the best fishing in the world in your backyard, and then you go anywhere else, everything's going to be a disappointment. And it's going to be really hard to catch fish because now you're fishing pressured water. You've never dealt with that before. So when you grow up and the only place you can fish is the Passaic River, which might be the worst river in the world, at least along that stretch, if you can learn how to pull fish out of there, you can pull fish out of anywhere. So that's definitely been a big learning point for me, was fishing that sort of dirty, pressured water and really appreciating it for what it is.
Have you ever fished behind Jefferson School?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That place is loaded.
Now, when I was in middle school, we would pull out monsters.
Monstered.
Absolute. I went back, I think, last year or 2 years ago. I cannot remember. And nothing.
No.
And then, yeah, I think, it died out. There was a lot of snapping turtles in there. I know that. But we couldn't get, and I mean, you could throw anything in there, and as soon as it hits the water, you would have a bass.
They're totally untouched. And whoever lived back there hated when people fish.
But it's not, and he would call the cops on you. I found out because of the Onyx hunt map that it is not it's not private property.
Really?
It's a part of I think Springfield County Park or something like that. I got to double check with that, but I believe.
Oh, that's interesting, because that guy was sending dogs out at us and stuff, and like really scaring us.
Yeah, no, yeah, same thing. He would chase us and everything when we're kids. I mean, we're in middle school. He would chase us and like, I'm calling the police and and the police sometimes would be chasing us out of this fishing spot. Turns out, it's not private land. The guy doesn't own it. And I went back there and I fished it. I didn't get it. It was late in the year and it was right before work, so I had a rush. But I do want to get back there again because his little lake or little pond has some monster bass in it. All the other little spots around it used to. I don't think they do anymore. If they, I'm gonna have to do some research and go out and fish. But it's funny. We fished some of the the same spots, and we didn't know each other until high school.
Yeah. No, and I don't think we've ever even been out on the water together, man, because I didn't even know you were into this stuff until fairly recently. So that's all obviously awesome, but that's also a good point. Just knowing what you're dealing with, knowing the laws, because especially if you're planning on bending them, knowing what you're up against, because a lot of people, they'll try and pressure you off of your fishing spots because they think they own it. A lot of times they don't. And there's a lot you can do. And the best spots in Jersey, for the most part, aren't in state parks. They're not in county parks because those are obvious to too many people. So you really do have to venture in places that are a little bit on the edge. So having that knowledge beforehand is so key.
Yeah, definitely. And, thank God for Onyx hunt map. So I was able to figure that one out.
Yeah.
let's move on a little past Summit. When exactly did you start fishing? What was your first memories as a child fishing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so kind of a little bit of a long-winded backstory, but I kind of started out more along the lines of, I didn't even know this was a word until recently, but herping, which is basically like going out and finding animals, catching frogs, snakes, turtles, that sort of thing. And my grandmother, when I was like 3 or 4, she bought me this like 20 pack of these Nat Geo pocket guides. And there was one for everything. There was one for like amphibians, reptiles, stars, you name it. There was like a little 30-page pocket guide about all of it. And so I would read these things all the time. I was obsessed. And like kindergarten, I'd go down to like little creeks around Tatlock and flip over for salamanders and creek chubs and stuff like that. But I remember the first time I got into fishing was actually, I went on like one of those Boy Scout camping trips. I must have been like, actually, it was 2004. I only remember because the Yankees were playing the Red Sox and somebody bought a crank TV to bring out in the woods to watch the ALDS. But anyways, we went on a fishing trip there, and none of the dads, they're all from Summit. They had no idea what they were doing. None of them knew how to fish, and they're all trying to be macho and teach their kids like, oh, you want to cast out as far as you can and into the deepest water you can, and that's where the big one is. But I remembered reading these little pocket guides, and I was like, oh, it always said fish liked to hide under things, and fish liked. So I turned around, and we're on this little L-shaped dock, and there's like these little lily pads. And I'm like, well, everyone's casting out into open water. I'm just going to cast towards the shore. I'm going to cast towards the lily pads. I'm the only kid doing that. Everyone's trying to huck it out deep. And next thing you know, I remember I caught 9 species in like 30 minutes. I was just catching everything. And I was like, damn, wow. If I just like, I just remember thinking like, wow, I just knew a little bit of something. I did something different than everybody else did. And here I am catching so many more fish, and I'm really learning about it. And I got to see species I'd never seen before. I was catching smallmouth, largemouth, pickerel, little pike, everything. And that was, from then on, I was just hooked. I couldn't stop. But I played baseball all high school, college, and obviously that being a spring, summer sport, I never really had the time to get as into it as I have recently. But that sort of passion sparked that day. It's been with me ever since.
Kurt, you got any questions for the freshwater? We'll do freshwater first, and then we'll go into the saltwater, since Kurt is mostly going to be the one asked, because I know nothing about saltwater fishing. So that'll be Kurt's little personal interview for you with
for sure.
the saltwater. So,
So the only question I'm going to have is, well, I'm going to have a bunch of questions, and I can't say that. So, one, if you could pick, like, say you wake up on a day off from work and it's beautiful out, you're going fishing, you're going freshwater fishing. What are you fishing for? And pretty much, is it your local spot? Or are you going to different spots? Like, what's your thing? What's your fish that you're going for?
Last couple of years, I'd have to say I really got into trout fishing, specifically brown trout. Reason being because there's wild browns in places you wouldn't imagine, even in Jersey, and they get big. You can catch 20+ inch fish, and I've always been amazed. You go on like the DEC website, and it'll say wild browns in Jersey get up to 14 to 16 inches. And we're going out there, we're constantly putting 18 to 22 inch fish in the net. And in terms of local versus far, one thing I like about the brown trout, before I move on to that, is you really have to get in tune with the water. Like, it's a lot of wading, it's a lot of hiking. You're not going to find good fish within a mile of a parking spot. And you really got to venture into places where people haven't really fished before. And that's my favorite part, is it takes you into areas that are more solitude. There's less people, and there's just no tracks, and there's no evidence of humans. And when you find a place like that, especially in Jersey, it's pretty special. It's such a densely populated state. So you could find that area where you feel like you're the only person who's been there in the last week or month or year. That's a really cool feeling. And those are the fish that you typically find there, the brown trout. That's when you know you've gotten to that spot. In terms of like near versus far, I think there's something really unique about both of those experiences. It is really cool when you catch a big trophy fish close to home. There's something special about that, because it's just something that it's more difficult, and people are driving over these places, people you know, people you hang out with who don't fish, they're driving by these spots every day and have no idea what's in front of them, which is a little bit of a shame, but it's also a blessing at the same time because it's more for me. But it's also more human interference. And anytime there's more people around, there's just less fish. That's just a fact. Anyone who fishes is going to notice that. So if you really want to get on some of those like life-changing bites, those incredible bites, you gotta get out. You gotta go far. The further, the better. And I'm at this point now where, 6-hour round trips just doesn't even sound that far to me. Like, if I have a full day, I'm not wasting it in Union County. I'm probably not even spending it in Jersey. I'm getting out there. But at the same time, when you love the sport, if you have 2 hours in your day, you're working and you get off, you got 2 hours before it's dark, you're going to hit the Passaic. Like you still gotta feed those vibes a little bit. And it's good to have experience in both types of water.
Oh, absolutely. But now here's another one. What would be your rod of choice to go out and catch these browns? Your reel, what pound test you're using, like line and stuff like that. Just as a little bit of a rundown of what you look for in a rod, a reel, pound testage. Are you somebody that horses that fish in, lets them fight? Everybody has a different style. I would
For sure.
Curious about yours.
So for trout fishing specifically, I actually use my Uncle Larry's rod, and that's like our little group, Uncle Larry Outdoors, where the name came from. And I got into trout fishing after I got his rod. He passed away, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years ago. And I went in his basement and he had a bunch of old trout gear. And one was like this really crappy, like 5-foot rod from like the 60s. And it was like this hybrid fly rod, spinning rod. It was really, really, really interesting rod. And this thing was beat, man. Like it had hand-tied guides with twine all misaligned and rusted and steel. But I used that thing exclusively for trout. I never went out and bought a new rod. I did get a little Shimano Nasky. Like I got a good reel for it, which I think is important because you don't need like the most expensive reel. You don't need anything that's really smooth. You need something that's not going to fail when it matters. That's the biggest thing. Just something where the drag's always going to work. I did take the rod in to a local bait shop out in Long Island, and I got the thing refurbished. So it's the original blank from the 60s, but I got new Fuji guides in it. And then I just replaced a little bit of the cork on the handle. But what I would look for in a rod, if you're fishing spinning, I'm not a fly fisherman by any means. So if you're spin fishing for trout, there's no reason to use anything but an ultralight. I'm a fan of the lightest tackle possible. Make it as sportsman-like, get the best fight you possibly can while still having a chance to land the fish. And there's really no trout in this area that you won't be able to land on an ultralight rod if you're skilled enough and if you're patient enough. So that being said, ultralight rod, a reel to match it. And then when I'm fishing for, native brook trout, like finicky wild fish, I'd say 4-pound test mono is really what you want, something that they can't see that well. You're fishing for some of these bigger browns, maybe up in like the Delaware River region, something like that. You might want to bump that up to 6 because you can get into some really big fish. And then that being said, always keep the drag a little bit tight on the hook set. And then once you have that thing hooked and you get a good hook set and you practice that a bunch of times, immediately loosen it, let that fish run. Couple reasons. One, it's not going to pop out of the mouth because there's not as much tension. Once that hook's in there, you don't really want more tension pulling on it. The other thing is you want enough tension for it to stay, but you don't want enough where it's going to actually pull out of the mouth. And then the other reason too, especially these trout, they're pretty fragile fish. And I'm mostly catch and release with these wild fish. So you want to let them run and stay in the current and do what they have to do. You don't want to be horsing them in on the rocks and, beating them down if you're going to get a good release on them.
Yep, absolutely. One of my things personally that I'm big into the fight and letting the fish fight out and everything like that. But me myself, I'm more of a active fisherman. I like to use lures and different things like that. I'm not somebody that dead sticks it, puts the rod down and lets the fish take a worm. I'm not one of them people. I find that it actually tends to have more of an effect because the fish actually end up swallowing the bait before you realize you even have one on a hook, Whereas you're working at lure, you're working at thing, you catch them more in the mouth. You have less of a chance of injuring that fish and that fish not being able to return back to the wild if you are
Right.
releasing them.
Exactly.
So now the last one to finish it up for me, for as far as your brown trout and things like that, I'm sure that Mike has a couple more questions. What is your go-to lure?
So the one thing I'd say about trout fishing is you kind of want to have one of like every basic bait on you at all times. The one thing we've really discovered this year is that there's a go-to lure for that specific spot and a specific day, and that's kind of going to be the one thing that they're feeding on. But that particular bait is always changing. So if I'm going out with two other guys, we always make sure that we're all throwing three completely different things to start. And then we're going to try and figure out the pattern from there. Because you might be fishing the dam of a river and they're feeding on dead alewives, and like, all right, like we want to throw like little spoons that look just like them. But then you also might be fishing some brackish water or some like muddy water out in Union County for stocked fish, and they might be feeding on, they might be used to be feeding on like stocked corn bites, whatever they give them out in the hatcheries, and you might want to be throwing more like little pink worms or something that matches that. So the necessary baits that I'd say you always want to have on you want to have a little spoon, a little spinner, a little jerk bait, like a little minnow type jerk bait, maybe like a floating bait that's like a jerk bait, but with a less erratic action. And then little tubes, like crappie tubes, are great, and they're very underrated for trout. And then also tiny little like pink worm imitators. Those 5 or 6 baits, if you have those in your box at all times, you're set. What you want to make sure, I've always thought, people talk about fishing as like a patience sport. And it is in the sense that like you want to be out there all day because you never know when they're going to start biting. So you don't want to cut yourself short. But being patient doesn't mean standing in the same spot, throwing the same bait over and over again. Those fish are going to bite and they're going to eat. They need to eat. So you got to figure out what they're doing and where they are. And that requires movement and changing baits. So I really don't think, like, one piece of advice for anyone listening would be, you never want to get stuck on the idea of one particular bait in one spot and one time of day, because they're animals and they're moving and they're changing with the environment the same way we are. So you don't want to give them too little credit.
No, that was excellent said. First I got tons of questions. Kurt was stealing some of my questions there. But how many are you bringing? One rod with you, or are you bringing multiple?
Trout fishing, I'm bringing one rod. I'm bringing that ultralight rod. That's it. Depending on what I'm doing, I'll bring more. I'm trying to get in the habit of bringing fewer and fewer because it's just a hassle. And one thing, freshwater, I'm always going to have my ultralight on me no matter what, because it's the most fun to throw the lightest gear possible. That being said, if there's a chance that, there's muskie or pike or big bass in that water too, I'm going to bring out at least one other rod, like maybe a medium spinning rod, like a 7-foot medium spinning rod. And then maybe like a 7-foot medium heavy bait caster. So I'd say, like, depending on the situation, always the ultralight. And then sometimes you want to have a bait caster and a bigger spinning rod on you as well. And then saltwater is a totally different game we can get into later.
Yeah. Well, real quick, go back to the Browns. You don't have to let everyone else know. We can easily edit this out. Where the hell are you catching those? Because we found native brooks, but I've never found native browns in Jersey yet.
I think the thing you want to look for with browns, so one thing is, like, we've always preached finding your own spots for like the specific location, but I've always been about trying to tell people about like my process and how we find these places.
Yeah.
You want to find one, like, the cleaner the water, the better, because trout are indicator species. And if there's a lot of pollution, they're just not going to survive, at least wild fish. So we're talking Jersey, look north, like look where it's less populated, look where that water's colder, that water's cleaner. That's a huge thing. There also needs to be like some sort of influx of bait. So, if it's connected to a reservoir or a dam or a big lake, there's always a better chance that there's good fish in there. I guess the final thing too, like, Google Maps is just always your best friend. I never look at FishBrain or any of those sorts of apps, because those spots are burned. So if someone's posting about them, that means people already know. You want to just go off the beaten trail as far as possible, because where the DEC, where FishBrain says there aren't fish, don't take that all with a grain of salt, because that just means where people have ventured to don't have fish anymore, because people have probably caught them and pressured them all. If you can get off the beaten path, you're going to find these fish eventually. But look north, look north.
Okay, look north, and that was excellent, said, because I imagine a lot of people out there, and I use, I take a look at those apps, and I have one. I have, I think, FishBrain, and I usually actually use it just to record my fish.
Yeah.
I know with the size, and I take pictures and I send in what bait I was using, what lure I was using, because I go a lot into statistics of it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially some of my favorite, bass spots and, trout spots, but I don't put the location, unless it's
that's a good way to use it.
Very, well known about, like one of my bass spots and one of my favorite ones, I go to, usually before work all the time because it's so close and, I got to go to work, unfortunately. That one, I don't mind, I'll put where, the location is, but you can even put it where the exact spot, and I won't put it the exact spot.
Yeah. And that's a good way to utilize that sort of app, because if you're putting in the data on how you're catching that fish, you're just going to get yourself more dialed into what sort of patterns are working and what aren't. The real key for me is just don't burn your own locations if you can avoid it, which is really hard, because it's hard to share things on social media and spread the love of the sport while not having someone figure out where you are. So it is hard to do perfectly, but you'll make your own fishing experience better. And then you're also going to encourage people to explore and find new places that they don't know about. And that, for me, is really what it's about. Fishing is the medium for me, but for me, it's really about exploring and seeing new parts of the world, or even the state that I didn't even know existed.
Yeah, definitely. Before we get into, your company, can you name all the different fish species you've caught?
Definitely not. I couldn't name all of them. It would probably be something like, if you show me a fish, I could tell you if I've caught it. I definitely wouldn't not remember having caught something, but off the top of my head, I couldn't spill it out for you. But if there was something you were specifically interested in, if I caught it or not, I could definitely tell you.
I got one.
Okay. Go, Kurt.
You ever catch a snakehead?
I've never caught a snakehead, and all my buddies have caught snakehead, and I have targeted snakehead, and I don't know why I haven't caught one, but I know they're all over South Jersey, Philly area. They're like bass down there now, man.
Dude, you and me both. I actually went out a couple of days, and I cannot catch one to save my life. And everybody swears they're in there, and there's hundreds of them. And for whatever reason, when I go down there, nothing for me either. So,
what are you throwing for them?
Dude, I throw everything in the that I have. I go anywhere from fake imitation fish to frogs to pretty much everything, chatterbaits, everything, all the stuff that they claim they catch them on. The only thing I haven't tried that they claim works over the top, if you throw this out there, you catch them, is a live killie. I haven't tried that with a bobber. Throw a live killie, put a couple split shots on them, drop them down a little bit so they stay down. They claim that works. That's the go-to for them. I haven't tried it yet myself, but I think that's what's going to happen next time, because I'm tired of getting skunked.
I would love to get on a snakehead. I mean, it seems like such a cool species. I've targeted them hard too. I've gone out of my way to try and catch them, but not too out of my way, because I'm never really down in South Jersey enough. And I'm almost hoping they don't make it north, just because they're invasive. But at the same time, they're a cool fish, man. And they get big. They get 9-10 pounds.
Some of them are huge.
Yeah.
And their mouth is so damn strong that it's, I was watching this video, bent the guy's hook, right? Almost straight, because he couldn't get it off. And
he got that dinosaur bony mouth. Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of, say the same jaw, not strength, and to pit bulls. Once they lock on, it's very difficult to get them off. And hey, at the end of the day, I love pit bulls. So, I got tons of pits, but, their jaw is just ridiculous. And you can say, A snapping turtle, same thing. If you got bit by a snapping turtle, the
Forget about it, man.
difficulty to get it off would be probably, I'd probably say, is close to a snakehead.
Yeah.
So, you say you can't name all the different species, but give us your top 3 species, plus also your top, like your biggest catcher, your most favorite memory of catching that fish.
One of my new favorites is definitely got to be king salmon. They come up through the Great Lakes and they go up those tributaries in New York in the fall. And, there's really nothing like it. We're talking like a river the size of the Passaic, in some parts smaller. And you just see 35-pound salmon just porpoising out of the water, one after the other, when they're coming up to spawn. And I've just never seen anything like it. And they fight so hard, man. And you're using like bass tackle and you're running down the rocks with them for like 25 minutes trying to get these things in. And that's got to be one of my new favorites. Second favorite have to be fluke. Very basic species, summer flounder, man. I've had family out on Long Island forever. And that was really the first type of fish where like I would spend like August out here at like my grandparents growing up after my summer baseball season ended. And that was always the fish that like I would go out for in high school and college by myself. And that's really where the first fish where I was like, wow, I'm very confident that I'm one of like the better anglers out on the water going for this type of fish. And I never really felt that way about any other species. So that always got like a close place in my heart with those. And then third are just those wild trout. There's nothing like it because it just takes you into places where you're finding rivers and creeks that, you would think you're in Wyoming or California or something, and you're in New Jersey or barely over the line in New York, and you're in this incredible scenery, and really only trout are going to take you to a spot like that. And then I know you had a second half. What was that second half of that question again?
Can you name your favorite, your biggest catch or your most memorable catch from each of those species?
From each of those species, yeah. So my most memorable king salmon, I've only gone for him once. And I think it was that picture that you posted on Instagram when you were introducing me to introduce this podcast. So we caught a couple of those. We went up for 2 or 3 days, just drove. I got off of work Friday. We drove from New York City. I got on a train, got to Summit, met with my buddy. We drove to Syracuse and we explored up there Saturday and Sunday morning. And we drove back to the city. I took the train in with my gear and went to work Monday. And, that was the only weekend I'd been from. We caught a couple of giant kings and it was so cool going up for the first time, only having like 48 hours. We just fished the whole weekend straight and being able to figure out that bite was really special. Best fluke catch. I think it would be more specific day. There's, you got like all these party boats out there and you've got these guys doing these charters for fluke. And I found one spot in my bay out here in Mauritius Bay that's this little gully that it's so funny because it's surrounded by sandbars and none of these big boats can get in there. So I just fish it from shore. And what I do is I'll anchor up, I'll swim to the sandbar with my rod, and then I'll wade around there. And I'll be fishing, there's 100 yards on either side of me, these giant party boats, but there's just one little stretch like the size of a football field that none of these boats can get in because of these sandbars. So you can only fish it from shore and everyone's too lazy to do that. And I've had days there, man, we're catching like 70, 80 keepers and it's just nonstop action. The rest of the bay is dead because everyone's fishing it. Brown trout, there's a place that we fish that you can only get to in the wintertime because the river freezes over and you have to cross the river. And there's a floating patch of ice that's about 100 yards long. It's really sketchy. You got to like keep your balance over and you can only fish it when it's really frozen because you cannot fall through that ice or you're going to die. But if you cross over that river, there was a time we caught, man, like 26, 27-inch wild browns in the middle of January and like 25-degree weather in the snow. And there's really nothing like getting out in the winter and having some of your best fishing days when everyone else is inside, cranking the heat. That's just the best feeling.
That sounds damn. That sounds like so much damn fun. I mean, we're out usually in the winter hunting, so we know definitely the experience of freezing your ass off to pursue, you know, a animal or a fish. So we definitely can relate to that. You know, and the king salmon. I mean, I've always dreamed of going to do a salmon fishing, you know. And my cousin moved to upstate New York, so hopefully next year during the, you know, in break of hunting season, hopefully I can tag out early and then head up for the salmon run in New York. But what a fish. And when I saw that, I was like, jeez.
Yeah, man,
and they
get up there for it.
That too.
Sorry?
And they get bigger than that too. Especially
they do.
One. Oh my God.
They get huge, and man, there's really nothing like it. Like I've never seen this many fish in such a small area. It's absolutely incredible, and it's definitely worth at least taking one weekend off in the season. Even if you don't land one, I mean, we must have hooked into 10, 15 fish and landed 2 each. Even just to see what's going on up there, it's pretty life-changing. It's just like, wow, there's this much life here. I would have never guessed in a river like this it could hold this many fish.
Yeah. You know, and another thing, you know, we definitely have to hear that story. You know, I was talking about it with you a little bit of how the hell did you get yourself hooked?
Yeah.
And, you know, the cool thing was, you know, it was your buddy's first time landing a mongo or sea fishing or
big gator bluefish. Yeah. So I've had a lot of weird little hiccups lately out there on the saltwater because it's something I'm just really getting into on like a more extreme basis. But we've been catching, you know, these 10 to 15 pound blues off the surf these last couple of weeks, and it's just been an incredible run. And I had some buddies visiting from college who have always been interested in this stuff with me, but it wasn't something that they were doing quite to the same extent that I was. And I got one of my buddies out of the house one day. Everyone's kind of like hanging around and boozing, chilling on the beach, whatever. I'm like, yo, like, let's take a walk. We're going to get down to the rocks, and I think we can catch us a big blue. And he's like, I've never been saltwater fishing before. Never used any of these baits. So I'm like, all right, just trust me. Let's give it a shot. So we get down there. We're fishing for a while. He ends up actually losing one, a smaller one. And I'm just like, you know what you're doing. I'm going to leave you on your own. So he's fishing off the rocks, and we're like in an inlet. So strong current, pretty big waves, and it can be a little dicey at times if you don't know what you're doing. But I trusted he was all right. And there's like these, not lighthouses, but almost like light towers on the end of the rocks that are about 20 feet tall, 15 feet tall to mark the spots for boats at night. So like, you know what, he's fishing, he's using my gear. I'm going to go climb this tower. I've always been afraid to, honestly, because it's all rusted and bent over and it's windy and stuff. Like, I'm just going to climb to the top of the tower and check out the view while he's fishing and whatever. So I climbed to the top of this tower, and I'm looking behind me and I'm watching him fish. I got this awesome view, but then I look down, I'm like, damn, this is scary, because I'm like 20 feet high, but below me is just rocks and big waves crashing into the rocks, like right over the ocean. I'm like, yeah, if I slip, like, I'm done. Like, I'm breaking my legs and falling in the water. Like, and I'm kind of bugging out up there. So I'm almost in my head, I'm like, I hope this kid catches a fish, because otherwise I'm going to be too afraid to climb down this ladder. I'm stuck up here. So next thing I know, I look back and I see his rod just doubled over. And I'm like, oh my God, he's got a big one on. So I snap out of it. And I climb down, I immediately just sprint down the rocks, and I slide right into the water. And there's like these like little waves crashing over me. Like, I got to be a little careful, but I'm just so excited because this kid's never held a fish this big before. You know, I'm like, all I want to do is get this fish in for him. I know that feeling of catching your first one. So I've got that in my head. Like, we have to land this fish for him. And I get this fish up on the rocks, and next thing you know, the fish is flopping around and he's all pumped, but I'm still down in the inlet. And I'm like, I got to get out of here before I get like swept in this current. So I start climbing up the rocks, and I put my hand on the rock by the fish. It makes like a flop or something, and it just hooks me. I don't even know how it happened. This treble went right through my index finger, big saltwater treble. And this bluefish that was like this 10-pound blue is still flopping, and I'm hooked to the fish. Fish is hooked to me. And I'm like, dude, we can't let this fish swim away, because if this fish falls back in the water and makes a run, it's going to tear my finger off. So I'm pinning this thing down with my elbow. I'm like, dude, you got to kill it. you got to kill it. And he's like, I've never killed a fish before. And he's giving me these puppy eyes. He's like, dude, I don't know. I don't want to do this. And I'm like, there's no other way, man. Like, I'm not losing my finger over this bluefish. So I toss him like a brick that I found next to me. And he builds up the courage and he whacks it. I'm like, all right, dude, good job. And he's like breathing heavy. I'm like, all right, yeah, now you got to do it again because I'm not taking a risk. And he's like, you got to do it again. I'm like, do it one more fucking time. Do it again. So he whacks it. It's dead. And we got so much adrenaline at this point that I unhooked the fish, but I'm still hooked bad. Like, I don't even feel the pain. We're just laughing our ass off. You got this giant X-Wrap, like 7-inch X-Wrap dangling from my hand. I'm like, all right, we gotta go. So we start walking back on the beach and I find a pair of pliers. I'm working it. It's just not coming out. We're YouTubing how to pull out a hook, but this is like a big saltwater hook. It's not coming out. I'm like, all right, dude, I don't want to go to the hospital because I don't want to bother the hospital workers like during COVID and everything over a hook because I was an idiot. Like I don't want to. They're probably exhausted. They don't want to deal with me. So we go to the medical tent down at the public beach about a mile away, and they said they had some medical staff on hand. So we walk in, and it's like these 18-year-old girls who had just graduated high school, and they look at my finger like, "Oh my god!" They're like, "Can you help me with this?" Like, I guess we could pull on it. I'm like, yeah, no. I'm getting out of here. Like, well, we can wash it off for you. So they take me to the back and they start rinsing it. But they don't even give me soap. So I'm just rinsing it in like brackish water. And I'm like, all right. Like, where's like the nearest hospital? They're like, I don't know. There's probably one on Long Island though. I'm like, yeah, I think there's a hospital out here. So after that, we drove to an urgent care. And they told me, yeah, we don't trust ourselves with this thing. Go to the hospital. So then we drove to the hospital, which is like my last resort. I was trying to pull it out myself, but it was stuck. And I'm just sitting in the emergency room with my mask on and this big ass bait hanging from my hand, just like waiting for 2 hours. And then they see me, numb it up, push it through, clip it. I'm out of there in 5 minutes. But end of the day, we landed this bluefish. He got his picture. We had a story to tell, a lot of laughs. A great time. Wouldn't trade it for anything.
Dude, absolutely awesome story. I mean, what a hell of a time. I mean, it sucks it happened, honestly, during COVID, because if it wasn't COVID, I imagine you just would have went straight to the hospital.
Yeah, probably.
But damn, I mean, your buddy better have bought you dinner or something for helping him land that, awesome
No,
fish.
man, they actually made me man the grill that night, and I had one hand. They were all too bombed by the time I got back from fishing to even see straight, so I was in charge.
That's great, man. Before we, dive into, the saltwater, two more things. Obviously you told us how Uncle Larry Outdoors, was created. Like, what a unique story. I mean, not too many people can say, hey, I created, this company and got this YouTube page going and, all this, other stuff, yours comes, so much in depth, of a family member's fishing pole. And that's exactly, and unfortunately, that family member passed away and everything like that. Mm-hmm. So it's a great tribute, but, what's next for the company?
Yeah, I mean, kind of the message, I guess, overall that we're trying to portray. It's like everyone's kind of got like an Uncle Larry who got them into the sport. And that's why I called it that, because everyone's got that person. I feel like we all have it within us. Like as an outdoorsman, you're going to find this eventually, but it kind of takes a bit of an introduction. It takes like a little bit of a guiding hand to really get into it. Like everyone's probably got someone they can name who helped introduce them to the sport. So really the goal of the page is just to get as many people out there as possible to recognize that this is like a really special thing that we enjoy doing, and go introduce it to someone else. Go be that person's Uncle Larry, I guess, in a sense. In terms of, what's next for the page, I feel like for a while I was putting a lot of pressure on ourselves to make it into like something we do full time. And I stopped enjoying the process of fishing, making these videos and getting the word out there, because I'm putting pressure on myself to like, try and make some money and do it full time. So I tried to take a step back on that and really just focus again on doing what we love and getting out there as much as possible. But specifically, one thing I really would like to do, I want to get out there and start doing some sort of a podcast, but instead of like a regular podcast, I want to take people out fishing who have never been before and hear their story, with the idea being that we do these conversations while we're fishing. We have these conversations, these interviews while we're fishing, because I think you get in a different mindset when you've got a fish on the line. Same way I'm sure you feel like when, you got a buck walking right under your tree stand, like you're not thinking about anything else but that moment. You are so present in that moment when these things are happening, and you're really just going to get the most honest answers out of people. You're going to get the best version of themselves. And that's really where I want to take it next, is start hearing other people's stories and introducing them to a sport, but doing it in a way where they're going to kind of see what I'm seeing out there, and I'm going to hopefully learn something from them at the same time.
Wow. It seems like, you and your company and our company, we share a lot in common, because, that's our big goal and our big focus, especially, growing, people who haven't even ever been in the outdoors, who are interested in, who want to learn how to fish, who want to learn how to hunt, and just don't know how to go about it. We've said it multiple times on this podcast. That's, one of our biggest goals. And, it seems like you want to move in the same direction. And you guys do have especially I took a look at your YouTube page. I mean, you guys got a really good number. I think you're over 1,000 subscribers.
Yeah, we got a good amount on YouTube. I mean, I think the biggest thing too is I've never really met somebody in this community, whether it's fishing or hunting. Like, I mean, obviously you have the exceptions, but people who like genuinely appreciate the outdoors for the right reasons always seem to be really genuine, good people. And I feel like, growing up in Summit, before I really understood how much this stuff meant to me, I could definitely be a total asshole. And I knew a bunch of total assholes. And the more I've gotten into this, I just feel like it's made me a better person. I've seen it make my friends better people. And I genuinely think it's not just an activity. Like, it breaks down all barriers that people make up in their heads and between other people. It's just such a common bond. Like, we all live in the world. We all live in nature. So we all experience it, and we can all experience these incredible moments and these incredible activities together. It's just, you build empathy, you build compassion for the outdoors, you build compassion for other people. It just makes you a happier, better person. So I really think it can genuinely impact how people treat each other, how we treat the world. We can just get more people involved with these activities. I think it's starting to take more of a real meaning to me as like a mission, rather than just something I like to do on the side.
Last question for
before we get into that, I want to say something too. What I've noticed in Jersey is that for such a densely populated state, right? You have a couple different outlooks of people, in my opinion. You have the people who have never done anything with fishing or hunting and are totally against it. And like you said, you're trying to get them out there and they're like, no, I really don't know, until they actually get out there and try it. And they get hooked on it, because let's face it, it is great to be able to do that. But what I've noticed, you don't really have too many people that do it all. You don't have if you're a saltwater fisherman, you're a saltwater fisherman. If you're a freshwater fisherman, you're a freshwater fisherman. Or you're just a hunter. You don't really.
Or you're just a pheasant hunter.
That do it all. And I think for people, they really need to go experiment and go really try all the different things that Jersey has to offer. Being on the East Coast, you have the opportunity to go out there. What's the furthest you're going to travel? An hour 30 minutes across. If you live on the west side of Jersey, to go over to the coast to try some saltwater fishing, and then freshwater is all around you. And as far as like hunting goes, you have, if you're a densely populated area, which like I have to travel 40 minutes or so. But once you're hooked, you're hooked. It's just, you have so many opportunities here, and people don't even realize, and just don't fall in that category, I feel like.
Yeah.
Very, very well said.
I couldn't agree more with that. Absolutely. Yep. Like, I mean, I'm someone who's like, I started off bass fishing in New Jersey, and that was like exclusively what I did, was fish for bass. And it gets boring after a while, and you kind of limit out on your opportunities. But once you're like, all right, do I love this because I love bass fishing, or do I love this because I love getting outside and experiencing New Jersey and experiencing the East Coast and what nature has to offer, if that's the reason that you love it, then all the more reason to pick up a different rod and go for a different fish. And then come the fall, pick up the bow, and then maybe get a harness, go rock climbing. Like, just do different things, find different mediums. But whatever your medium for exploration is, the whole point is we're enjoying the outdoors and we're enjoying nature. And like, that comes in so many different forms. You don't want to get caught or hooked on one particular thing. That for me takes away the fun of it, because then it just becomes a very specific skill rather than something that you're like a holistic experience that everyone's enjoying.
Yeah, no, and we for the most part we do it all. Just the one thing I told Kurt I'll never freaking do is spearfish. And that's about it. Everything else I'm open to. But the whole
spearfishing is pretty cool though.
It's cool,
right?
and I do like to watch it. My ask, no, is not getting in the water to go swimming and shoot stuff. As fun as it does sound, right? I am not. I can swim, but I am not the most confident person.
Yeah.
In New Jersey's water, I would try it probably somewhat a little more clear, crystal clear water. In Jersey.
Dude, don't underestimate the water, man. It is. I almost drowned last week. Like, it was bad. It was like really bad, and I'm never underestimating the water again, especially the salt. Like, I tried swimming to a lighthouse with my rod. I got sneakers on, and my rod is about 100 yards offshore. It's not far. And I'm like, we're catching fish all day. I'm like, we're watching bluefish and stripers blitzing behind this lighthouse. Like, how cool would it be if we climbed up on the rocks and we're fishing this old lighthouse from the lighthouse? Like, that'd be so cool. We start swimming out there. We got 3/4 of the way, outgoing tide taking us to sea. I'm like, dude, we're about to miss the lighthouse. Like, we're getting pulled out to sea. We're getting swept out. The next thing I know, man, I'm 600 yards from shore. I'm disoriented, swimming the wrong way. I got my eyes closed, thinking I'm going to die. I'm on my back, just paddling in, just hoping for the best. Dropped my rod, kicked off my shoes, kicked off my shirt just to get my weight down. Lost my setup and everything. Barely got in, man. It took me like 45 minutes. I was passed out on the beach for like an hour. And I was like, the one thing is, you want to push your limits, but you don't want to cross them if you can avoid it. And the water can be dangerous, man. The woods can be dangerous. So even in Jersey, even Long Island, where you think nothing really can go wrong, what could go wrong? We're in a suburban area. There's definitely a reason to be cautious, especially with something like spearfishing.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And that's the one thing I feel like that people tend to forget is you could always bring out a flotation device, and attach it to you somehow. That's the number one thing. If you got to take a break, you start to get that tired feeling, just hold on to it. Even if it's not fully keeping you up, it's taking pressure off of it.
100%, man. We're still swimming the spots and we're still doing crazy stuff, but it's like, dude, why not just throw a life jacket on? Like it's so much easier, but like you also don't want to let the fear keep you from doing cool things, because we're all going to die. And like, if I'm going to go out fishing, at least I went out fishing, but at the same time, like, I don't want to. So let's like do it safe, but also push our limits. Cause if you don't, there's this balance between pushing things too far and putting yourself in a dangerous situation, but also not pushing them far enough. And then you're fishing the same spot over and over again and not experiencing new things. Like, there is a little bit of a thrill to pushing yourself and having things be a little dangerous. And that's usually where you're going to catch the biggest fish or probably see the biggest deer, is when you're in an uncomfortable situation where other people aren't willing to put themselves in.
Mm-hmm.
Mike knows all 100%. About that.
Yeah, no. Listen, especially when it comes to, for us with hunting, we try to put our stands where people, and it's hard because Jersey, yet again, unless you have your own private land or you have access where you can hike in miles and miles in, like me with some of my stands, I'm hiking in, but I'm going behind private property where other people aren't going.
Yeah.
I know, and Kurt, which we love talking about, don't matter for him. And I don't know if you've listened to his interview episode, but this man has no luck when it comes to putting up a stand deep in the woods, far.
And the thickest bird dogs put in.
Dogs just coming up on him, pheasant hunters who are out walking their dog at the worst times are coming in disrupting, his hunt. It sometimes seems like it doesn't matter, but we do try our best to get to places where people just don't want to go. Like, listen, me,
Yeah.
I don't mind getting dirty. I don't mind walking through muck and stuff like that. Like,
No.
that to me, that's fun. That's excitement. And hey, we don't want to walk up on black bears. Have we? Yes, of course we have. It's not going to stop us from doing what we did.
And it shouldn't, man, because those are almost natural buffers that keep all the normal guys out. And where the normal guys hunt, maybe you're getting a spike every season. Who knows? But you want like a big 8-10 pointer in Jersey. You better get out there. You better go deep because, people are hunting right off the side of the road. Anyone can throw a tree stand up 100 yards from the beaten path. But if you go off it, you get in a few miles. These animals aren't stupid. They're still alive for a reason. Like, people underestimate how intelligent they are. That's their domain. So if you want to find them, you gotta go into their home. Can't expect them to be right off the side of 22. And sometimes they are. You can get lucky. But if you want to be a good hunter, if you want to be a good fisherman, if you want to really learn stuff, you better put yourself in an uncomfortable position, and you better fend for yourself, because you got to venture into their territory if you want to see what's really there.
Yep, definitely. So before Kurt gets into the whole saltwater fishing with you, which will be our part 2 of the episode because we've already hit a long one, explain the fish drive you got going on for the kids in Harlem. You hit me up, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and let me know about it. I believe Ish and Joe, if they're available, they're gonna try to go. I'm
awesome.
working that day.
Yeah, that's next weekend, right?
Yeah, I believe.
Yeah, it should be next weekend. The only potential snag is we raised a good amount of money, man. It's the only potential snag is I bought so many rods from Amazon that they were giving me issues about shipping it to a residential address because they're convinced I'm going to resell them. So I'm trying to figure out the shipping. So if we don't get the rods in by then, we might have to push it back to the weekend after the 4th, because I don't want to do it July 4th weekend, because I don't want to get the crowd that I'm not hoping to. I don't want like tourists grabbing these things, it's not for them. But hopefully next weekend is the goal. That's as of right now. But basically, we kind of touched on this earlier about how I just genuinely believe in the fact that we're all living on the same planet and we're all living in nature, we're all experiencing that. And that's like the great unifier. There's just no denying that. All the divisions you see, not to get too into it, but they're all man-made, man. It's all BS. And fishing and hunting and these outdoor activities really just breaks down those barriers, because you're facing the same deer, you're facing the same bear, you're catching the same fish. There's no difference between you and me when you're out there on the water. You're just in that moment. And I just think it makes people, I don't know, I mean, you see what's going on in the political climate and the social climate, and it's just so insane all over the place. And we're just like, well, what's something we can do without getting too politically active or posting on social media all over the place? We're I feel like I see everyone posting on social media, everyone's speaking out, but I just don't see people actually go to the communities and do anything. So for me, I was like, I'm not going to post about shit. I'm just going to all right, this is something that makes me happy. It makes me a better person. It's really all I know. I can't do anything more than that. So I'm not going to try and pretend like I know something about something that I don't. What I do know is that fishing's pretty awesome. And I do know that, these kids in these communities don't have access to fishing the way that I was fortunate enough to have. But I also worked in New York for 2 years. And I know that there is some opportunity there to fish, and there is some nature there. And Harlem, Mere, Central Park, there are fish there. And there are ways to get involved, and there are ways to learn about what's there. So I'm like, you got these kids who are less privileged than I was growing up, quite frankly, and they don't have the same opportunity. But it's, actually the day I got Uncle Larry started, man, I was fishing Harlem in February, this patch of ice, and these local kids came up to me. They were 10, 11 years old, asked me what I was doing, didn't think there were any fish in there. And I just let them cast with my rod for 2 hours, man. And they didn't catch anything that day. But when I was getting recruited to play baseball, I went down to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And after my tryout, I went to a pond, like inner city Baltimore, man. Like this thing was disgusting. And this kid came up to me. It's like 11 years old, and he grabbed my rod and he was fishing with my dad. And this kid, I fished all day, caught nothing. He caught a 2-pound bass in his first cast. And I've just never seen a kid that happy because I'm like, damn, it's a 2-pounder. I've caught 100 of those in my life. Like I would have taken it off the hook, thrown it back, hardly smiled. And this kid was ecstatic. I'm like, well, I don't know what's going on socially and politically right now, but I do know that if I can get to Harlem and get these kids on a fish, I'm going to make a bunch of kids smile. And like, that's all I can frickin' do. So we're going into Harlem next weekend. We raised about $1,000, which was amazing. Cause I mean, dude, I don't have a real nonprofit. I didn't have time for it. And I was like, hey, here's my Venmo. If you guys trust me, send me some cash. If you don't have the money right now, send me some gear. And we got gear, we got baits, got about $1,000. I bought I think 24 rods, 24 reels, bunch of bobbers, tackle boxes with baits. We're just going to put these packages together, go in. The one thing I do want to do is try and team up with some sort of local activist there because I want to get it to the right kids. I don't really want to give it to kids who do have these opportunities and have a Hamptons house, but happen to be in the city that day. That's not who it's for, to be honest. But I also don't want to be turning kids away because of their race or because they have more money or less money. It is for urban kids who don't have these opportunities. So I do want to try and figure out a way to balance that a little bit instead of just hand it out randomly. So that is one thing I'm working on, but we're going to be there kind of an unextended period of time, hoping to get there 11 o'clock next Saturday and, just get out there, hand these rods out and hook these kids up with some gear, show them how to tie these knots and get them on some fish, man, whether it's a sunny, a bass, crappie, who cares, man? Just get them to feel the tug of the line and just see wow, I'm in this concrete jungle and there's still life here. And I think that could really just, if it makes the kid smile and that's all it does, that's still a win. And if it makes the kid hooked on fishing for life, even bigger win.
Yeah, let's catch up after this. I got a few organizations that I work with in the city that I think would be able to definitely help get you in touch with some kids.
That'd be awesome. That'd be great.
Yep.
Yeah, no, definitely. And what I like to tell my patients and people who go through this stuff, and especially everything that's going on now, for me, and my belief is I'm not going to post about it on social media. I'm not,
Right.
I'm going to do my best to make a difference. And hey, I work in the medical field. I work with kids who are underprivileged, who've gone through things that are so horrifying that where we live, it's so unheard of. You don't hear of stuff like that. And I say, if you can change even one person's life and just make a difference, and hey, you're doing this thing, if Joe gets to go and Ish gets to go, if Kurt's not working, but I believe he is on the weekend, but he could be going whenever after he's done with work, whatever the situation is, if we can get to change even one person's life, and get them onto a better path or on the right path, hey, we're making a big difference. We're not going to get everyone. You're not going to be able to change everyone's life, but you know what? If you can get one, that's one less person. And guess what? When they have their own kids, now they can teach their kids the correct way and pick up on not only just a sport, but a lifestyle as in, hey, you know what? You need to work for what you want. You need to go out there and you need to try. And you know what? You may fail, but you got to keep pushing. And I think that is a big problem. And I see it all the time with work. And my patients is they give up really easily, and playing sports and fishing and hunting, it does teach you that you can't give up.
Right.
You are going to fail. Trust me. I tell my girlfriend all the time, because she's trying to learn how to fish. And I go, listen, it's not perfect. There are good times where I'm going to screw up and I'm going to miss a fish, or I'm going to miss a deer, or, something's not right. Same with you guys. You're going to have a fish on and hey, your line may snap,
I lose more than I catch, man. 100%.
Yeah. So,
no.
And that's, you're failing. But guess what? You don't just say, I'm done for the day. Screw it. No. You retie, you put a lure on, you throw the line back out there, and you give it another shot, and you keep pushing until you achieve your goal.
Right. Couldn't agree more, man.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in, Johnny. Thank you yet again for coming on. It was a great getting, talking to you again and hearing your side of the story and how you got into, the outdoor world. And, I can't wait for future segments. And we will be doing the Uncle Larry's Outdoors edition every month or so. So he's going to be coming on every month and giving his story, his update on his fishing season, with whether it's saltwater or freshwater. So tune in for that, and thank you yet again.
And definitely stay tuned. This one, like Mike said at the beginning, is going to be a 2-part series at least. So we got so much content here, and there will be a lot of good information in the second part as well around saltwater fishing. So again, Johnny, as like Mike said, really appreciate having you on, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate you guys having me on as well. It's great to talk to all of you. Hope to get out on the water, get in the stand together at some point. But in the meantime, excited to get back on here in the next couple months.
For sure.
Absolutely. We'll get together and do some fishing, hopefully, and some hunting very, very soon.
Great.